coaches give you these super strict warm up and cool down protocols. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with your brain?
Was there a certain trigger that made you look into the sports psychology side more?
Well, I think what it started with was in 2014, I had a really good season. And then 2015, I changed teams and just kind of got off on the wrong foot with it. First race, I got a flat tire, qualified well, and just got a flat. And then second race, I crashed and got a concussion. And I kind of got into a bad funk where I wasn't really performing well. I think then another race, I thought I had a great run and finished 25th. And compared to what I was doing the year before, I was pretty far off. And I just was getting down on myself and in a bad rut. And Jordy suggested to me working with Dr. Kristen Kime, who's my sports psychologist.
And then I had no idea that you'd also worked with her as well.
Yeah, I've been working with her since 2016, I think.
Why did you think that was something you should do?
I don't know. I just felt like I was kind of missing something, there was just some things in my head, especially at the World Cups, that higher level of racing, and you're not necessarily racing for the win, but for me, I'm racing for a top 20. So it kind of took a bit of a different mindset to really get that kind of figured out.
I don't know, something like that Everesting challenge. I would think something like that takes, how long did it take you? 8 hours?
Yeah, it was just under 8 hours. So
how many different mindsets do you go through in an 8-hour, 29,000 foot climb?
A lot. It's funny though, for efforts like that, when I went for the White Rim FKT last year in the 100-mile loop in southern Utah, it's kind of a similar mindset, just you against yourself, really. So for the Everest challenge, I was really just focusing on it's so long. I didn't really ever want to look at how long I've been riding or how many miles or how all that stuff. I would just basically hit my lap button on my Wahoo every lap, and I would just take, all right, here's another. We're gonna climb for 14 minutes. We're gonna turn around, go 50 miles an hour down the descent for 2 minutes, and then we're gonna do it again. And I just kept hitting the lap button. So it's basically just in a way, it's kind of like a time trial, but it's long.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always been better at that kind of stuff. I'm fine on my own doing that. Where I've struggled before is at the World Cups, for example, you have one bad lap, you get passed by 20 dudes, and you go from 40th to 60th, and then it gets in your head, and you're like, shit, why am I doing this? This is terrible. I just need, and then you end up just riding backwards, and next thing you know, you're in 100th, and you get pulled, and that's the end of the day. So I think it's hard to find that mindset. Even though you're back in 60th, you can easily go straight back to 40th and up to 20th. You just have to keep fighting forward and ride your own race. So that's the biggest thing that Chris and I have been working on is just making it a solo race, a time trial. Just do my thing and I'll end up where I end up, but not worrying so much about exactly what place I'm in.
What part for you causes you the most headache? Is it the sitting around, the travel, the start gate?
It's the unknown of how your competition is going to that. So you can't control your competition. What stresses me out is to do what I think is a good run, and you have a feel for it in downhill. You come down, you're okay, that was a good run, should put me in 10th place or whatever. And when that feeling, when that perception is off, and you're oh man, I hit everything well, I didn't make any mistakes, but I didn't push the limit too hard, and you get 30th, it's damn, but it's only a second and a half or 2 seconds up to the 10th place spot. So it's knowing, there's plenty of times where you show up and you're oh, today I'm gonna go way faster, and you crash and slam and bad things happen. So you can't turn it up in one day. But it's just with downhill racing, from my position is I'm normally 10th to 20th sort of place, and there's a lot of guys in there, and the times are so tight. It's knowing how hard to push that limit and almost getting into that mindset where you're not thinking about how hard to push it, where you're just riding as fast as you can and not measuring everything the whole way down. Usually that's the best I've ever raced is when I'm just like seeing what's a second ahead of me and just reacting to that without even bypassing my brain, you know?
Yeah.
How much do you stress about, let's say, bike setup or like all the outside factors? Is that something that gets in your head like the downhillers, or is it more of like a personal thing?
Not so much. I think for cross country, like, I mean, luckily, like all my, like, I'm happy with all my stuff. Like, I have great sponsors and good parts, and everything's dialed. So I think, pun not intended. But once I get the bike set up, like, I really don't mess with the settings a whole lot. Like, it's really just tire pressure and compression. Sometimes you'll stress about what tires to run. But like for us, like, it's a little simpler, I guess. Like, since the downhillers, like, they have like, you know, a couple minutes and everything has to go perfectly, right? Whereas with us, like, if your tire pressure is a little bit off, like, sure, you might lose a few seconds on the downhill, but in the end, the races are won on the climbs. So like, as long as you're able to get traction on the climbs, like, we don't, I mean, I'm sure there's athletes that do stress about that stuff, but for me, it's like, it's a lot less so than the downhillers. I mean, I see you guys messing with suspension and like fine tuning all that stuff so much. And for us, like, it's important, but it's not nearly as important as it is to them. Yeah, I don't really mess with things much. I just like to keep it simple and the bike's predictable.
I think predictable is key, and that's come up a few times.
It is, like, whether it's right or wrong, if the bike's predictable, I think it's going to be better than if you 100% nail it for that condition. If you're comfortable with the way you have it, then it's going to be better.
Yeah, totally agree. You've always been a tinkerer too. Like, I've never seen you leave anything alone.
Yeah, and I've definitely had it to where it affected me negatively, and I think I've seen that side of it and come out of it, and now I can, at least with my race bikes, get it to a spot where I'm happy with it and kind of leave it there. And I've found like other things to tinker with, like trail bikes or dirt jump bikes, or like, you know, just other stuff that's like I can do the same tinkering, and it's fun for me to experiment and try an extreme and find where the limit of something is. But when you're doing that with your race bike, it's a dangerous game, because that's your career, and that's like, those decisions can, if you go off down a black hole, you know, it could lead you to a bad place. Like, even with you guys with tuning, like, if you know how the shock works, you won't stress out about it that much, because you know that there's not that much you can really do. Like, you're not gonna have like, oh man, I need to find 5 seconds. Maybe Jordy can fix the shock. It's like, it's not happening. Like, when you understand how the shock works, like, you're in a sweet spot that you could maybe go off of it a few clicks here or there, or a slight valving change, but you're not gonna ever be that far off. Like, nobody on your team or Fox is going to let you be that far off of where you should be, unless you really try to go down a black hole. Like, you got to try to have your suspension set up bad, you know? So it's crazy to me,
so true.
like, understanding how the shock actually works, how the hydraulic and everything works, that people put so much weight on getting it tuned correctly, or that they're going to get so much time out of it if they go to see you. You know what I mean?
If I want to make 2 seconds to get into the top 10 from where I'm at, there's a lot of other places that I can focus. And a lot of it that I used to put a lot more on external things, like, oh, it's the bike. Oh, maybe my team could be better. Maybe like my travel plans or whatever, like all these other things that I could do. But really it comes down to like how you ride the bike and your mindset when you get in the start gate.
Do you apply those lessons to everyday life? Like, how different is life from being able to cope with a race scenario?
I think it can be applicable. I mean, for us, like, as professional athletes, that is pretty much your life. Like,
It's true.
although, like, that said, like, it definitely has helped with like traveling, because obviously travel can be like really stressful, you know, and it's kind of the same thing. It's not in your control. Just like take a step back, take a deep breath. Like, there's nothing you can do if the plane's late, and there's nothing you can do if like security's backed all the way up and you miss your flight, like you're just gonna have to like chill out and deal with it. Like stressing out's not gonna make anything better.
And yeah, a lot of it coming down to that mindset part of it, especially for World Cup racing. Everybody loves to say that racing is mental, racing's so mental, but like, what do you do mentally to be in the right space? And if you are, did you record? It's like baking a batch of cookies and not knowing what you put in it. One time you make a really good batch of cookies and you won't know how to make it then. So you got to like record what you did on the good weekends. Like everybody loves to have a big powwow after you have a bad race and figure out, oh, how are we going to be better? But even when you have a good race, you got to look back on that and see how you can replicate it again.